Hello Berlin history nerds and welcome to part 2 at our look at the history of the U8 U-Bahn line. In part 1 we took a look at the construction of the line, which was trouble to say the least, but hey, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be there, they got the job done. And so in part 2 we're going to begin our look at basically history in and around the stations down the northern section of the line. In parts 3 and 4 we're going to take a look at the middle and the south. If we've never met before, if you've never seen me online, my name is Johnny Whitlam. I've been a tour guide of Berlin for like all of my adult life, since 2010. I absolutely love sharing the history of this city, and so I started this YouTube channel, and well, this is episode 2, so hey, thank you very much for being here. I hope that you enjoy it. Please like and subscribe and comment if you do, because yeah, I love this, and this is what I want to do, and that's how you can help. Let's begin our look at the history. We're going to start at the very northernmost station, Wittenau, which opened in the mid-1990s. When you walk into this station, I think you'll find that compared to most Berlin U-Bahn stations, it's a little bit different because, frankly, it's quite fun and quite colorful. And this fun, colorful design is really typical of the architect that designed not just this station, but loads of stations in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and obviously the 90s as well. His name was Rainer G. Rummler, and as far as I know, he designed more than 50 stations on the Berlin U-Bahn network. And this really is his signature style. In fact, Wittenau is one of the more tame designs for Rainer G. Rummler. He has a lot of really wild ones on the U7. For this section of the U8, you can look at Lindauer Allee, Franz-Neumann-Platz. It's pretty wild and cool stuff. One of the more plain stations on this part of the line, though, is the Karl-Bonhoeffer-Nervenklinik. Let's have a look at that. So I don't think you need to speak German to work out that Klinik is clinic, but what's here today is far more than a clinic, and in fact, that's been the case for more than 100 years. If we go back to the 1880s, a mental hospital, an asylum opened here called the Dalldorf Asylum. So called because, well, that was the name of this area at the time, Dalldorf, when it sat actually outside of Berlin, out to the north there. And the idea with the Dalldorf Asylum was that it was going to be the most modern and humane asylum of its day, and it was a nice idea, but it never really worked. It suffered from overcrowding from the beginning. People escaped, so down in Berlin it got a reputation as the place where, all of the crazies escaped from. And so the people of Dalldorf decided in the 1920s, look, we don't really want to be associated with them and with that, so we're going to have a rebrand. They renamed the area Wittenau, and the hospital renamed itself Wittenauer Heilstätten. There you go. But that's not the worst thing that would happen up here, though. I mean, we're talking about the 1920s, and unsurprisingly, in the 1930s, under the Nazis, this hospital, some terrible things happened here. In the 1930s, the Nazis said that mentally and physically disabled people were a threat to the purity and prosperity of the German race, and as a result, at this place and many others, people with certain conditions were sterilized. The idea being, of course, they're not going to be able to have any more children. In the 1940s, however, this situation gets a lot worse, a lot more serious, when the T4 euthanasia program kicks in and people like this are euthanized, they are killed. While it's unknown exactly how many people were killed here under the Nazis, what is known is that the death rate increased massively during the war years. Today, if you come out here, there's a sign that explains a little bit about what happened in the 1930s and 40s. As for when the Red Army arrived in 1945, apparently the first soldiers to come through here thought that they had discovered yet another concentration camp. So poor were the conditions of this hospital. Welcome to Pankstrasse station, another Rainer G. Rummler station, not so colorful, a lot more brown, but has possibly the best station sign on the U-Bahn network. Check out that P, very 70s and very exciting, and a very good place to be in Pankstrasse station in case the world kind of starts to fall apart. Pankstrasse was opened up in 1977. We're talking at the absolute peak of the Cold War, when mutually assured nuclear destruction seemed like it was around the corner, and well, better plan for that, better turn your U-Bahn stations into fallout shelters. So, Pankstrasse was designed with room for 3,339 Berliners to take shelter in the event of a nuclear attack. But if you were to walk around the station today, you wouldn't necessarily know that. This station is designed with some pretty cool security features. 2 trains could pull in, not just to bring people into the shelter, but to provide more seating, essentially. There would be doors that would roll down at either sides of the tunnel to make sure that the poisonous radioactive air couldn't get inside. And even then, there are actually multiple hidden rooms within this station. There are places for people to sleep, they have bunk beds that are stacked 4 high, enough of them can actually be moved out and put onto the train platforms as well. And then there's a kitchen and common areas and all sorts. There's a little bit of a secret to Pankstrasse station. For us though, we're going to continue on down further. When I say further, I don't really mean much further. We're going to the next station, Gesundbrunnen, a station that held the record for the deepest station on the Berlin U-Bahn network from when it was built in 1930 right the way up until 2009 when the U5 station at Brandenburger Tor opened. So yeah, sorry Gesundbrunnen. There we go. This station does have quite some history. That depth is really quite important. In fact, the reason it was so deep is actually because it wasn't supposed to be underground at all. It was deemed too difficult to dig down there when actually they could just have an above ground line like the U1, U2 lines are. But then when we get up to where Pankstrasse now is, there's a church there that complained it would be too noisy, it would ruin their services. And so yeah, Gesundbrunnen goes underground. There you go. The real history surrounding this station though for me is all about World War II, which, as I'm sure you know, began on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland, including bombing civilian populations from the air. Something that they, of course, never thought would happen to them because they didn't plan for it. When the war started, Nazi Germany had not started to build bunkers for its own people. This is despite not only knowing that they were going to bomb civilian populations, but having practiced it in the Spanish Civil War. And so about 10 days into the war, the decision was made to, maybe build some protection for their own people. And because of the depth of Gesundbrunnen station and the intermediary levels on the stairs, it was deemed that this would be a great place to turn into an air raid shelter. So that's what they did. It took a couple of years, but eventually there was room for 1,200 people to take shelter here. And by the time the war came to an end in 1945, in the spring, these had far more than 1,200 people sheltering inside of them. Estimates go between 5,000 and 6,000 people who would have entered here in horribly cramped, damp, scary conditions, not knowing what's happening to their friends, family, and homes outside. You can imagine how these people were living in fear of death, fear from attack of Soviet soldiers. It must have been an absolutely hellish experience inside of here. If you'd like to find out more about it, you can contact the good people at Berliner Unterwelten who offer tours of this space. As for us, we're going to watch those yellow doors close and travel on to our next stop. And again, we're not going far. After Gesundbrunnen comes Voltastrasse station, and I've got a real fun fact for this one. Let's have a look. It was this station that allowed the U8 to make its first little bit of cash. The station, which has these really nice, historic signs in here. There's a nicer one over here. Voltastrasse station was finished at the end of 1918, but it wasn't connected. It wouldn't be connected for another decade or more. And so, big empty space. What's a big empty space good for? Storage. There was a guy near here who decided he wanted to use this place to store potatoes, and so that's how they made their money, from rent for potato storage space, not from train tickets. Another fun fact about Voltastrasse station, this one and Gesundbrunnen were just two lonely stations up at the top of the U8 for a really long time until Pankstrasse opened in '77, because in the West Berlin days, the section under East Berlin was still open, it was still being used by West Berliners, but the stations were closed off to East Berliners. They became known as ghost stations. Let's talk more about that at the next one. The next station is Bernauer Strasse, one of my absolute favorite places to bring people on my tours because there is just so much history tied to the Berlin Wall here. How did we get a Berlin Wall? Let's go back a little bit in history, right? End of World War II, Germany is occupied by the four powers. They have a big falling out throughout really the rest of the 1940s, and that leads to the founding of two separate Germanys in 1949, the capitalist West and the communist East. From the beginning, the communist East has a big problem because there's more money, more job security, more of kind of everything you can imagine over in the West, and so people start to leave. In fact, in the first 12 years of a divided Germany, 1 in 6 people flee the country. About half of them are under 25, with 1 in 6 people leaving. East Germany faces really, genuinely an existential crisis. In 1952, they did seal the border between the two Germanys. This border actually goes right the way through Eastern Europe, becomes known as the Iron Curtain, but Berlin is not sealed off until the 13th of August, 1961. In fact, if you step outside of Bernauer Strasse station today, you can very clearly see exactly where the Berlin Wall used to be. If I come up to the top here, I can show you that there's a line on the ground that shows it. Let's have a look. You can see it on the ground down here, this double brick line, and then if we turn around, you can see that it's on the other side too, and then up here, green light, over here you can see that the exact wall is marked as well. That's what these poles show. So I'm standing in West Berlin and now East Berlin, which means that the subway entrance over here, this blue sign, it was really right on the edge. This means that when the East Germans built the Berlin Wall here, it had to go up above ground and down below ground and cut off the tunnel as well. Actually, I just saw on this sign here, if you look down here, you can even see when Bernauer Strasse became a GO station, or, well, a few years into the wall being built, but they take down the sign. This means that for East Berliners, they would have known that these stations were once here, but they've been boarded up. Get rid of the signs, get rid of it entirely, right? Kind of pretending that it's not there, even though there would be guards down there in the station. That tunnel, though, would eventually be opened up so that the U8 could continue to ferry people from West Berlin in the north, beneath East Berlin, and back to West Berlin in the south, traveling through GO stations. How kind of frustrating that must have been for East Berliners to know that there were tunnels open between East and West Berlin the entire time. However, if East Berliners really wanted to get through a tunnel to West Berlin, then Bernauer Strasse was the place to do it. Essentially, there's much more solid earth beneath Bernauer Strasse than there is in the rest of Berlin, meaning it's the perfect place to dig an escape tunnel. Including the 2 most successful to run beneath the wall, both named for the number of people who managed to escape through them. Tunnel 29 and Tunnel 57, both of them in the early to mid 60s. Tunnel 29 actually popped up right here. And yeah, they didn't have a lot of time to get through once they'd opened it up because they'd hit a water main, the whole thing started to fill up. Now, what might surprise you about a lot of these escape tunnels is, even though people use them to escape from the east to the west, which is beyond this building over the other side, the tunnels were actually dug the other way. People on the other side wanted to help people get out as well. Not only that, but digging a tunnel requires money, space, it makes noise. It's easier to keep a secret over on the other side where there are going to be fewer Stasi spies, not 0. Oh, and one of the crazy things about Tunnel 29 is that the people that were digging from West Berlin into the east, they got their funding for their materials and so on from NBC in the US, who wanted to film the East Germans emerging into Western freedom in 1962. I gotta say, that is very American. As for Tunnel 57, that came a couple of years later and a couple of blocks away, but also dug beneath Bernauer Strasse. Now, it was just under 150 meters long, about 145 meters. It started way over here on the West Berlin side beneath a bakery, and they managed to tunnel right under the Berlin Wall. Imagine how terrifying that was. What the Easterners would do if they thought that there was something beneath the earth that could be a problem, well, they would just dig a little hole, throw a grenade in it, and boom, gone. The tunnel eventually came out in the courtyard just right here, Strelitzerstrasse number 55, opened up 3rd of October 1964. About half the escapees got through on the first night, but on the second night, someone betrayed them. They got rumbled. The East German forces, I suppose, Grenzsoldaten, border police, they showed up, and there was a brief exchange of fire in which a 21-year-old border soldier named Egon Schultz was killed. Egon Schultz was shot in the shoulder by the Western escape helpers, but he was also shot in the back by his colleagues, and that's what killed him. However, the East were able to control the narrative, right? His body was left here in the East. And so when it came out in the Eastern press, it was basically, they used the life of this young man and his tragic death to reinforce that it's the Westerners that are the bad guys. This is why the Berlin Wall is here. The East Germans called the wall the anti-fascist democratic protection barrier. It's here to protect us, the good communist Easterners, from the fascists over in the West, the inheritors of the Nazi guilt. And so, yeah, they named military units after him and streets and all sorts named after Egon Schultz. It also means that the 57 people who escaped through the tunnel had to live with the guilt for decades, that their escape came at the cost of the life of this young man. The sad story of Egon Schultz, we come to the end of part 2 of our look at history along the U8 line. Tune in for part 3, where we'll go beneath the oldest part of the city and tell loads more stories about Berlin. If you'd like even more stories about Berlin, go listen to History Flakes, the Berlin history podcast that I do together with my intelligent and hilarious friend Pip. There's loads of episodes for you to go and check out. And if you'd like something a little bit shorter, then make sure to give me a follow on Instagram and TikTok as well. If you've enjoyed this here, please leave a like and a comment, share it with somebody. I really want to make a good go of this, and to be honest, I'm finding it quite hard work. But you don't need to know that, we're all having fun here. All right, goodbye! Look at those fun facts.